We put together this quick video to hopefully help some confusion out there and to share some best practices in ways to think about test locations and audiences and how they play out when setting up a test in Adobe Target, whether you're using a visual editor or a form-based activity. So let me jump in here and show you what's going on here. So I'm creating an activity. I'm going to use the visual editor. So here, when you supply the URL, this is the location. This is where you want the test to execute. We're not thinking about using the target profile or anything like that, like for repeat customers or people coming from Google or anything like that. This is where the test is running, the location. So I'm going to enter in the URL there. So the visual editor is loading and doing its thing. So I'm clicking on the gear here, and then I'm going to apply page delivery. Let's say we want to expand on that location to apply to run on the Mia Prova blog. So I've got lots of options here to expand on this location. And this is the first part of the confusion between locations and audiences that we get questions on. So we're limited here in terms of a list. There's nothing to do with people from Texas or geographic data. It's limited to location based, which it should. It makes sense to do that. Let's say I wanted to update this to go on the blog. I can do or URL contains www.miaprova.com blog. Cool. So now whatever I do in the Visual Composer will be applied here on our homepage as well as here. I can also make sure I can use path. I could do things that make sense for locations where specifically is the test running. So I'll just save this update here. So within this section, it's best to think of it at this experience stage is not so much who's going to become a member of test, but rather where the test is running. You'll notice there's a component here for audiences. I'm going to come back to this. I think this would be better served under the targeting, but I'm going to come back to this in just a second here. Let me go back into another window here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a form-based activity. So create an A/B test. Come here. I'm going to select form. Properties is a whole other component. It's part of locations. Again, this whole first step, whether this visual editor where you put a URL is location, form is also location because properties are defined based off of where the organization defines the properties, and they're based off of URLs or where the inbox calls are coming from. So now you'll notice here in the form, target global inbox. So choose my inbox. Now, if you notice, like in the visual editor, I supplied a URL. I told Adobe Target this is where the test is running. But if I apply code in here, I go ahead and I create an offer or pick an offer. It's a global inbox, so that offer is gonna fire. And Adobe, rightly so, is like, whoa, you should refine and limit the scope. Specifically, limit where the offer is going to fire. The visual editor absorbs this information automatically, and so the test by default will only fire and supply code based off of the URL. But the refinements here are audience refinements. So in the visual editor, if you notice, it's based off of you get URL, path, domain, that sort of thing. So here, you could go ahead and create an audience based off of anything. Browser, operating system, geo-targeting, stuff that speaks to the audience, the visitors that you want in. Yes, there's overlap. I could go in here and I could do site page, current page, URL, contains, /blog. Cool. Okay, so you're able to accomplish that, but because you're being exposed to visitor stuff, right? It's creating some confusion. So even though you can create all of these other different things based off of these attributes, at this particular state, please consider, think of this as the scope of where you want the test to run. When it comes to audience members, leave that for here. You can create audiences. You can use all the rich data that you'd like. You can combine multiple audiences. This is something very cool. You're not able to do it in the audience section, although there's a pretty big update coming there, which might enable this. But you think about it this way, in the targeting, who, not where, who. Experiences is the where, and the same thing goes for the visual editor. Think of this as who's going to become members of this test. So that makes sense. So here on the Experience tab, I said I'd come back to this. I'll do this for both. So on the left here, this is form-based. Okay. So you'll notice here in the form-based, audiences, single and multiple. Okay, which I think this needs to be moved over to here as well, but it makes sense for here. But let's say I select multiple audiences here. So I've got this I'm now within, I'm going to add an Experience B, Experience C. I'll add in an audience. Let me just create one here. I'm going to say Chicago, add rule, geo. I'm not a big fan. I could select city, but to me, companies are better to use DMA. You're going to get a wider net in terms of audiences. So I'm a big fan of DMA, but you can use city there. So wait for this to show up here in just a second. I'm just a shortcut. Whenever I create an audience, I like to just create copies of all the ones I'm going to use for the test. So DMA, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change this to San Francisco. Okay, so yeah, this is a much wider net. San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose. Okay, so I'll enter this to the DMA, save. Okay, cool. So first test, I want to select Chicago. So there's my audience for Chicago. I'm actually going to delete this. I'll stick with just an A and B. So Chicago, I'm going to add in San Francisco. So what this enables you to do, we still have the location specific. I'm actually going to update this because we need to do this. So I'm going to do homepage. Hopefully I have that in there. Home. Nope, I don't. So let me get out of there. So let me create the homepage. Big fan of homepages. Path equals that. That allows, it doesn't create an equal. You don't have to worry about issues with contains lots of companies have had issues not doing this. This is an awesome approach. So I'm going to do current page, path, not contains. We're going to use equals here. Equals this. So if someone comes in from paid search or something where there's UTM or tracking parameters, you'll still be members of this test. This limits the scope, but this does not, if you got lower environments with different subdomains, you'd want to update that information. So here, again, location. Here is audiences. So basically, if you get Experience A, you can have an offer for Chicago and an offer for San Francisco for down here. And I'll show you an example of that. Same thing applies within here. So again, think of this section as location where the test is running. But you do have the ability to add multiple audiences within here. Same thing as I did here. So I'm going to change the audience. I'm going to choose Chicago, done. And then I'll add in San Francisco, done. And here's an example of how this comes together. So let's say you're United Airlines. I'm a big United fan here, approaching a 1,000,000 miler, hopefully in the next year or two. But let's say United wanted to run an A/B test where the control was the same, but let's say they wanted to highlight a new route for people from Chicago. Here, I typed this up. So, multiple audience example. United wants to run a test to visitors in Chicago and San Francisco promoting new routes. SFO to OGG. OGG is Maui in Hawaii, and ORD is O'Hare in Chicago and OGG. So, how the multiple audiences works is in the experiences, we define the location, but then we can also add in different audiences like this. And so the test would look like this. Chicago, you can have a Chicago imagery with text promoting ORD, OGG. In San Francisco, the same thing. So that's kind of where that comes together within Adobe Target within here. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, it was a big customer today. Set up some tests and it was a little screwed up, so I had enough. Thought I'd make a quick video. If you like this and like others, or got other ideas for content that'd be helpful, please add it to the comments. Thank you.